Chinedu grew up in Aba, but his childhood never felt like a happy one. From the very beginning, he lived under the heavy shadow of his elder brother, Obinna. While most brothers protect each other, Obinna did the opposite. He bullied Chinedu, mocked him, and even stole the little things that brought him joy. Whenever Chinedu tried to speak up, Obinna twisted the story so that relatives always took his side. Soon, people began to see Chinedu as the weak one, while Obinna wore the mask of the strong brother. Their late father had left behind a small shop, hoping his sons would run it together. But Obinna made sure that never happened. He used tricks, lies, and intimidation to push Chinedu out, claiming the shop as his own. Chinedu swallowed the pain, refusing to fight dirty, and chose instead to build his own path with honesty and hard work. It wasn't easy. There were nights when he felt completely alone, but one thing kept him going: Amara. She saw his worth when others ignored it. With her, he found the courage to believe that life could be better. Together, they created a simple but peaceful life. Chinedu told himself that the past was over, that Obinna's cruelty no longer mattered. He believed he could finally breathe, finally focus on building a family of love instead of pain. But deep down, fate had other plans. What he didn't know was that betrayal, deeper than anything he had ever faced, was already on its way to his doorstep. Chinedu and Amara spent years trying to build a life that felt safe and peaceful. Their house was small, but it was filled with laughter, prayers, and quiet dreams. Whenever business was slow and money felt tight, Amara would take his hand and say, "Chinedu, we may not have much, but we have love, and that is enough." Her words were like medicine to his tired heart. She reminded him that peace was worth more than gold, and happiness didn't always come from wealth. But peace was never easy to protect, especially with Obinna around. He always found a way to push himself into their lives. Some nights he would come to their door drunk, shouting for Chinedu to open up. Other times, he would stroll in boldly, demanding money as if it was his right. If Chinedu hesitated, Obinna would laugh and mock him, calling him a failure in front of Amara. Every insult burned like fire, but Chinedu bit his tongue. He told himself, "Let me not fight him. Peace is better than war." Amara hated seeing her husband humiliated, yet she admired the way he controlled his anger. "You're stronger when you walk away," she would whisper. But even her gentle comfort couldn't erase the sting of Obinna's words. The house that was supposed to be a place of rest slowly became a battleground. The laughter didn't flow as freely anymore. Nights became heavy with silence, and mornings carried unspoken tension. Still Chinedu endured. He thought ignoring Obinna's chaos was the best way to protect his home. He never imagined that the real danger wasn't in the insults or the demands. The true storm was growing quietly inside the very walls he thought were safe. While Chinedu tried to keep his family together with patience and love, he had no idea that his trust was about to be tested in the most painful way. For him, home was everything. For Amara, peace was worth fighting for. But for Obinna, home was just another place to conquer. And without knowing it, Chinedu was welcoming an enemy into the one space he thought could never be broken. Chinedu started to notice small changes in Amara, changes he could not fully understand. She was not the same lively woman who used to fill their home with laughter. Instead, she grew quieter, her smiles became fewer, and at times her eyes seemed far away, as though her thoughts were locked in a place he could not reach. Whenever Obinna's name came up in conversation, Amara would quickly change the subject or become defensive. "Why are we even talking about him?" she would snap, even when Chinedu mentioned nothing serious. At first, Chinedu tried to convince himself it was nothing. He told himself, maybe she is just tired, maybe it is stress. Business was hard, and he thought perhaps the weight of their daily struggles was simply too much for her. His heart trusted her so deeply that he refused to imagine anything beyond that. To him, Amara was his safe place, the woman who had stood beside him through every storm. How could he ever doubt her? But what Chinedu could not see was what was happening behind his back. Obinna, the brother who had made his life miserable since childhood, had found his way into Amara's loneliness. With his smooth words and poisonous lies, he began to twist her heart. He whispered things that cut deep, planting doubt where there used to be faith. "Chinedu is too weak to provide for you," he would say. A woman like you deserves more than a man who struggles to survive. At first, Amara resisted, but Obinna knew exactly where to strike. He reminded her of the bills left unpaid, of the nights she went to bed worried about the future. He painted himself as the strong one, the successful one, the man who could give her the comfort Chinedu never could. Slowly, her heart began to waver. She didn't see the trap for what it was. She only saw a door out of her worries. Meanwhile, Chinedu was blind. He still looked at Amara with love and pride, believing she was his greatest blessing. He never noticed the way she avoided his eyes, the way her laughter now carried a hidden weight. He held her hand, not realizing it was slipping away from him. The cracks in their marriage were small at first, almost invisible, but with every word Obinna whispered, those cracks widened. The home that Chinedu fought so hard to protect was slowly breaking apart from the inside. And the cruelest part was this. The brother who had stolen his childhood peace was now circling the one person Chinedu cherished most, ready to steal her too. Chinedu thought he was fighting only poverty and hardship. He didn't know that the real enemy was sitting across the table, wearing his own brother's face. One evening, Chinedu's world shifted in a way he could never have imagined. Amara had been feeling unwell for days, but she kept brushing it off, saying it was just tiredness. That night, while preparing dinner, she suddenly collapsed to the floor, clutching her stomach in pain. Panic rose in Chinedu's chest as he rushed to her side, shouting her name and begging her to stay awake. With trembling hands, he carried her to the hospital, his heart pounding with fear. Hours felt like years as he waited outside the examination room, praying silently. Lord, please don't take her away from me. Finally, the doctor came out with a small smile and said, Congratulations, your wife is pregnant. Relief washed over Chinedu like cool water on a burning flame. His eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, joy lit up his weary soul. His child. A new beginning. But the joy lasted only seconds. As he turned to share the moment with Amara, he saw her face. Pale, shaken, tears streaming down her cheeks. Something was wrong. Amara, what is it? He asked, holding her hand tightly. She shook her head, sobbing uncontrollably. Then, with a trembling voice, she whispered the words that shattered him. Chinedu, the baby is not yours. It's Obinna's. The room went silent. Chinedu felt the ground beneath him give way. His ears rang, his chest burned, and his hands went cold. What did you say? He asked, hoping he had misheard. But Amara broke down completely, covering her face, repeating, I'm so sorry. It's Obinna's. The words pierced him like 1,000 knives. The brother who had stolen his childhood, the shop, his dignity, had now stolen the one thing he never thought he would lose, his wife's loyalty. Chinedu staggered back, staring at the woman he loved more than life itself, now carrying the seed of his greatest enemy. Every memory of their love, every smile, every struggle they had faced together, flashed before his eyes, now tainted by betrayal. He wanted to scream, to break something, to run far away, but his body felt frozen. The pain was too heavy, pressing down on his chest until he could barely breathe. Amara reached out, trying to touch him, but he pulled away, his eyes filled with hurt and disbelief. Why, Amara? His voice cracked, barely a whisper. She had no answer. Only tears and shame. That night Chinedu's world collapsed. It was no longer just about poverty, struggle, or insults from his brother. This was deeper. His own blood had pierced his heart in the cruelest way. The man he once called brother had taken everything from him, and now he stood on the edge of losing himself too. News of Amara's confession spread through the village like wildfire. It seemed as though everyone had something to say. Some relatives shook their heads in pity, whispering behind closed doors, Chinedu is cursed, even his wife could not stay with him. Others laughed cruelly, calling him the man who could not keep his wife. Their words sliced deeper than knives. Everywhere Chinedu went, eyes followed him, some filled with judgment, others with pity. Soon a family meeting was called. The small compound was filled with relatives. Uncles, aunties, cousins, and elders who had known Chinedu and Obinna since childhood. The air was thick with tension, as though the walls themselves knew a storm was about to break. Chinedu sat quietly, his jaw tight, while Amara kept her head bowed, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Obinna, on the other hand, walked in with the arrogance of a king, his chin high, his smile smug. He acted as though he had won a prize. The room went silent as he spoke, his voice loud and shameless. "She belongs to me now. Even her child is mine. What more proof do you need?" Gasps filled the room. Some relatives covered their mouths in shock, while others muttered in disgust. But Obinna only smirked wider, enjoying every moment of Chinedu's humiliation. Chinedu's hands curled into fists, his knuckles white. Every fiber of his being screamed to fight, to strike, to silence the brother who had taken everything from him. But he sat frozen, trapped between rage and despair, his heart pounding so hard it hurt. Their mother, Ngozi, could not hold back her tears. She wept bitterly, her voice shaking as she cried, "What kind of sons have I raised? Is this what your father prayed for before he died? To see his blood tearing each other apart like this?" Her sobs echoed in the room, cutting through the thick silence. But Obinna did not flinch. He stood firm, proud of his betrayal, as though destroying his brother's home was a victory. One of the uncles tried to calm the tension, saying, "Obinna, you have gone too far. A wife is not a prize to be stolen. Blood is thicker than water." But Obinna only laughed bitterly, throwing back the words. "Blood? What has blood ever given me? I take what I want, and now Amara is mine." Chinedu's vision blurred with hot tears. In that moment, he felt smaller than ever, crushed not just by his brother's betrayal, but by the judgment of an entire family. He looked around the room and saw the whispers, the pointing fingers, the silent pity in their eyes. He wanted to vanish, to escape the shame. That night, one truth burned into his heart. Obinna had not only stolen his wife, he had stolen his honor in front of the very people who were supposed to be his support. And as his mother's cries filled the compound, Chinedu knew nothing would ever be the same again. That night, after the family meeting ended in shame, Chinedu could no longer stay under the same roof. The house that once felt like a shelter now felt like a prison filled with pain. He walked out into the quiet streets of Aba, the night air heavy against his skin. Neon lights from closed shops flickered, dogs barked in the distance, and the whole city seemed to echo with his broken thoughts. Tears blurred his eyes as he wandered aimlessly, replaying every word, every insult, every betrayal. He thought about Amara's tears, Obinna's smirk, the whispers of his relatives. His chest felt so heavy he could barely breathe. For the first time in his life, dark thoughts crept into his mind. Maybe it would be better if I just disappeared. Maybe this pain is too much to carry. He stood on a deserted corner, looking up at the night sky, asking silently, "God, why me? Why always me?" But then, as though his father's spirit was walking beside him, he remembered the words his late father used to say, "A man is not measured by what he loses, but by how he rises." Those words struck him like a light piercing through darkness. His father had known hardship too, yet he never gave up. He had fought to give his sons a future, even if one of them had chosen to destroy it. Chinedu wiped his tears with the back of his hand. For the first time in hours he stood straighter. "No," he whispered to himself. "Obinna will not be the end of me. If he wants to destroy me, I will rise higher than he ever imagined." With every step he took that night, his pain began to turn into determination. He realized that Obinna had stolen his peace, his wife, even his dignity, but he could not steal his will to fight. Chinedu made a silent vow under the stars. He would not live the rest of his life as the broken man people mocked. He would rise, and when he rose, the same voices that laughed at him would whisper his name with respect. He went back home before dawn, not to sleep, but to pack his heart with courage. He was done being the victim, done being the brother everyone pitied. From that night forward, his story would no longer be about betrayal, but about strength. The pain was still there, raw and heavy, but beneath it, something new was being born, a fire. And as the sun slowly rose over Aba, painting the sky with light, Chinedu whispered once more to himself, "This is not my end. This is my beginning." Months went by after that terrible night, and Chinedu refused to let his pain bury him. Instead, he turned it into fuel. With nothing left to lose, he packed his bags and moved to Enugu, far from the whispers of the village and the shadow of Obina. There he found an old childhood friend, Emika, who welcomed him with open arms. Emika had always believed in Chinedu's honesty and hard-working spirit. Over late-night conversations, Chinedu shared his dream of starting fresh. Emika looked him in the eye and said, "Brother, if you have the will, I will stand with you." And so, with borrowed money and endless determination, Chinedu began a small poultry farm. It was not glamorous work. He woke before sunrise, built makeshift cages with his own hands, and fed the birds until his clothes smelled of feathers and sweat. Some nights, he worked until his body ached so badly he could barely stand. But instead of breaking him, the struggle gave him strength. Sleepless nights slowly turned into small victories. At first, villagers in Enugu laughed at him. "Is this the big dream? A man feeding chickens?" They mocked. But Chinedu ignored the noise. He knew what they did not, that every egg, every chicken, every small sale was a brick in the empire he was building. His persistence began to pay off. One buyer turned into five into 50. Soon restaurants, hotels, and even schools were calling him for supplies. Month after month his farm grew. He reinvested every profit, expanding his land, buying better equipment, and hiring workers who respected his vision. What once looked like a humble chicken farm began to transform into one of the largest suppliers in the region. Trucks bearing his farm's name rolled through Enugu, carrying food that fed hundreds of families. The same relatives who once mocked him in ABA now heard rumors of his success. "Chinedu, the one who was shamed, he is making more money than Obina ever dreamed of." Their whispers reached Obina too, and for the first time it was not Chinedu being laughed at, it was his arrogant brother. Through it all, Chinedu stayed humble. He remembered the nights he had cried alone, the insults that had nearly crushed him, and the betrayal that had torn his heart apart. Those memories became his driving force. He was not building just for himself, he was building to prove that no betrayal, no pain, no humiliation could keep a man down if he chose to rise. Brick by brick, egg by egg, he turned his sorrow into success. And as his empire grew, so did his pride, not the arrogant pride of his brother, but the quiet pride of a man who had walked through fire and come out stronger. Chinedu was no longer the man people pitied, he was the man people respected. He had fallen, but now he was rising higher than anyone had ever expected. Years passed, and life began to show its true colors. Obina, who once walked around with pride and arrogance, finally tasted the bitter fruit of his choices. He had lived recklessly, spending money as if it would never run out, drinking and gambling as if tomorrow didn't matter. He had mocked Chinedu for his struggles, but now he was the one sinking. One bad decision after another left him with nothing. His so-called friends, who once cheered beside him during his proud days, quietly abandoned him the moment his pockets went dry. The man who once boasted of strength was now broke, lonely, and forgotten. Amara too found herself trapped in regret. She had believed Obina's sweet promises, trading the steady love of Chinedu for illusions of comfort and wealth. But reality was cruel. Obina never cared about her or the child they shared. He left her to raise the boy alone, without support, without care. The same woman who once believed she was choosing a better life now carried the heavy burden of betrayal on her shoulders. Nights were long, and her tears often soaked her pillow as she realized how badly she had been deceived. Meanwhile, far away from their sorrow, Chinedu had transformed into a new man. His hard work in Enugu paid off beyond what anyone could have imagined. The small poultry farm he started with bare hands had grown into a booming enterprise. His business spread across cities, and soon he was not only a respected supplier but also a property owner. He drove sleek cars, signed contracts with major companies, and built a name that echoed in boardrooms and marketplaces alike. One day, Chinedu returned to ABA, not as the broken man they once mocked, but as a man of success. He drove through the streets in a polished car, his presence commanding respect without him uttering a word. The same relatives who had once whispered insults behind his back now stood in awe. "Is this really Chinedu, the one we laughed at? Look at him now," they murmured. Their whispers were no longer sharp with mockery but heavy with admiration and regret. Obinna, once the proud brother who had taken everything from him, now watched his downfall mirrored against Chinedu's rise. The tables had truly turned. Fate had shown that arrogance might shine for a moment, but it never lasts. Chinedu's scars had become his strength, while Obinna's pride had become his ruin. The village, which once mocked Chinedu as the man who couldn't keep his wife, now spoke of him as the man who built an empire. And as he walked through the streets of Aba, head held high, Chinedu carried not revenge in his heart, but dignity. For the world had finally seen the truth. Betrayal may wound deeply, but resilience can rewrite the story. The day of the family gathering was supposed to be a time of reunion. Relatives filled the compound, sharing food, laughter, and stories. But the moment Obinna walked in, the air shifted. Gone was the proud, arrogant brother who once mocked everyone. What stood before them was a shadow of that man, his clothes wrinkled, his face thin, his eyes sunken with desperation. Whispers spread quickly through the room. "Is that Obinna?" someone muttered. "How the mighty have fallen." He ignored the stares and went straight toward Chinedu, who was seated with quiet dignity, surrounded by uncles and cousins who now looked up to him. The room grew silent as Obinna dropped to his knees right in front of his younger brother. His voice cracked, trembling with shame and hunger. "Chinedu, please. I have nothing left. I need your help. I need money. I need a place to stay. I beg you, don't turn your back on me." Gasps filled the air. Never in their lives had the family seen Obinna like this. The man who once walked with pride, who had humiliated Chinedu countless times, was now begging at his feet. The same Obinna who had stolen his inheritance, mocked his struggles, and even broken his marriage stood there with tears in his eyes, pleading for mercy. Chinedu's heart pounded. Memories flashed before him. The nights he cried alone because of Obinna's cruelty, the shame he carried when his wife confessed her betrayal, the mocking laughter of relatives who once sided with Obinna. Every scar, every wound, every insult returned in that single moment. And yet, here was his brother, the once powerful man, now reduced to nothing. The relatives watched in silence, holding their breath. Some waited for Chinedu to explode, to finally unleash years of anger. Others expected him to rise like a king, reminding Obinna of every wrong he had ever done. Even their mother sat in the corner, her hands shaking, her eyes wet with tears, whispering prayers that peace might somehow be found between her sons. Obinna's voice broke again. "Chinedu, I know I wronged you. I know I hurt you. But I have nowhere else to go. Please help me, even if just this once." His hands clutched the hem of Chinedu's trousers, his pride shattered. Chinedu looked down at him, his face calm but unreadable. Inside him, a storm raged, anger, pain, and a strange sense of justice all fighting for space. He could feel every eye in the room waiting, every breath held in anticipation. This was not just a moment between brothers. It was a moment that would echo through the entire family, through the entire village. The powerful brother was on his knees. The broken brother had risen. And now the decision was his to make.